Welcome to another episode of This Week in Metropolis. I'm James.
And I'm so hot right now. On this week's episode, we have Pat Whalen, who is the executive producer of Forgotten Entertainment and co-host of yet another MCU podcast. We talked to him about all things Marvel and where he thinks the MCU will be in the next 10 years.
Yeah, we do indeed. It's a great episode. But before we get into it, we just want to say a big thank you again to everyone that does listen to our show or watches our show on YouTube. We appreciate your support. Keep liking the posts that we share across all the socials. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok. We're even on TikTok, Matt, doing silly videos from time to time.
But desperate for likes.
Bring them on. We'll take them.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to This Week in Metropolis.
Welcome to another episode of This Week in Metropolis. We are pleased this week to be joined by the executive producer of Forgotten Entertainment and one of the co-hosts of yet another MCU podcast, Patrick Whalen. Pat, how you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I've followed your show for quite some time now, and I didn't actually know until me and Matt started researching to find out a little bit more about you, so it makes us look a bit more professional. I didn't realise that it was part of a bigger thing, i.e. Forgotten Entertainment. For our listeners and our viewers, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about everything that you're involved in?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So, as you guys said, my name is Pat Whalen. I am the co-host of yet another MCU podcast, which I'll get to in a sec, and the executive producer of Forgotten Entertainment. Myself and my two executive producers, co-founders, whatever you want to call us, we've been creating media for over a decade together, starting first in the web series world, and then seeing an opportunity on the podcast space. So they were making a couple different podcasts themselves, one being Forgotten Cinema, our flagship show, and where the name comes from, which is all about movies that you just don't talk about or see anymore because everything's so intentional now with Netflix and Hulu and whatever streaming service you have or decide to use. And so, we were piecing together these shows and we thought, let's just put them under one banner. It'll help us, logistically, and not to get too in the weeds, but legally too, in case we were able to bring on some sponsors. And as we've been going through, we've brought on a few new shows. So we've expanded the yet another line of content, one being Star Wars. And next, we took a weird turn into DC with the DC animated movies. So the recent canon of the animated films, not quite the Bruce Timm ones, but the new era of them. And we've been growing since. So it's been nice to have, a nice network of folks that we could talk to, inspire each other, and continue to grow with while, doing our own shows.
Awesome. And can I just say as well, the content, after watching a few of your videos on YouTube, the content is so cool. Like, I don't know what background you guys are from. I don't know whether, for example, me and Matt, I have not got a clue when it comes to editing all the stuff. Matt does all that together for us. But the content that you guys put out is really cool stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And that goes back to the web series side of things. Is we're video first guys always. We joke we got the face made for podcasts, and that's why the videos never took off. But yeah, so the videos were a great way to kind of differentiate ourselves. And what I like about and what my goal is with some of the yet another MCU videos that we make is to be a little bit more informative than speculative. So I want people to come away from those videos, knowing a little bit more about the behind the scenes making of them, knowing a little bit more about the comic book origins of certain characters or shows or whatever have you, instead of just me saying, hey, this is what could possibly happen in the future. So that was our goal. And as far as, the filming of it, I do it on my iPhone in this, office bedroom studio thing I have right here with a green screen I bought off of Amazon, and just lock the door and get to it. And so I'm nowhere near an expert either. So that's my simple tip right there.
With the James saying it's informative, and you saying the sort of the desire to educate and sort of have a foundation for it, is that from your own personal knowledge, or is there a lot of research that goes into each episode that you put together?
A little bit of both. Like, I know for the most part, ironically enough, I was a DC guy growing up. Marvel just happens to have a more consistent movie universe, especially recently. So, and I knew those for a long time, and I read a lot of the comics. So, I know the comics as a starting base, is a good foundation. And then where there are some holes, go do the research and make sure I'm getting what I can right.
Cool. So with the different shows, is it just the MCU one that you're co-hosting on, or do you dip into the other ones as well?
So right now just co-hosting the MCU one, which is on a sort of hiatus. We had technically ended it as like a series finale with Far From Home, thinking, we'll never catch up to phase 4 and whatever, happens afterwards. They keep pumping out content, so we're finding new ways to make something. No, so I haven't guested on DC. Would love to. We talk to the guys all the time. And then I help out making videos. We have one called On the QT, which is all about the films of Quentin Tarantino. Yeah. I'm more of a behind-the-scenes producer, a little lax lately, but they have 10 guests, or 9 guests, because it's 9 movies of Tarantino. So they have one guest for each episode, and each episode tracks with one of the movies of the show, about Tarantino's career.
So in terms of one thing, sorry to jump to plan, James, with you mentioning movies, so one thing that we had interaction with recently, sort of Marvel related, was Black Widow. And certainly my personal opinion of it was, to be fair, I went into that film not with low expectations. I think it is, it wasn't a film that I was desperate to see. And I watched it, and I felt like it was a very much a movie of two halves. It sort of started as a real surprise, a much darker sort of theme, and was actually quite buying into it. And then it went on this strange sort of tangent, or well, not really tangent's the wrong word, but sort of suddenly became a slightly jokey sort of film, which was quite disappointing. What were your thoughts of it?
Exact same thing. Yeah. Almost word for word is Mike and I talk. Mike being my co-host for Yet Another MCU. We talked about this the other day. The first, I guess, maybe hour 15 of it, where it starts off like this Jason Bourne like thriller mixed with the Americans, which I love the Americans. And then maybe it was from the prison break onward, where it becomes like this sloppy comedy of errors almost that, like you said, two halves. It just, the second half does not track with what we got in the first half. And
it was the part for me, and it was almost like the line was drawn when they take the helicopter and they get in the helicopter and they're in their combat gear and everything's like, you're still following the suit. And then the next scene, they've clearly had their hair done. They've come out in the salon, they've got matching white suits on, and you just think, what's just happened? Like, where are we now? And it's, and he's joking around in the prison doing arm wrestling. Oh my God. Yeah, it's very bizarre. Very disappointing.
It also sounds, I haven't seen it yet. I will watch it. But it also sounds very unlike Marvel as well. I was quite critical of Endgame. As much as I loved it, I was quite critical because I felt the jokes in there weren't necessary, especially after everything that had happened in Infinity War. It kind of, the tone was already set. You didn't need to start throwing in gags, for the kind of feel of that movie, which they do in certain films. But from what Matt was telling me and from the messages that we were exchanging, and it sounds like both of you guys felt the same on that, it just felt very un-Marvel to do that. It sounded almost dare I say? I don't want to say it because I know you're a fan, but it sounds like something DC would do. Try and kind of, I don't know, not connect it all.
I think the individual components are very Marvel. Like the beginning, the tone in the beginning one was very Marvel in the sense of almost like parts of Civil War and that, which were very, very dark, with like Tony Stark losing his parents and the relationship, or the connection that Bucky had to all these different things and that. And then equally in the last half was, probably on a par with what you just saying, Endgame, of like Thor, like, where he's fat and that sort of humour. But it was, I just wondered that, and I don't know whether it's the case, was it to do with the pandemic and the way the production was disrupted, or was it, is there, I don't know whether that was their intention to make a movie like that, or was there some outside factor that sort of influenced or sort of disrupted the production, but you just don't know, do you?
I know I believe the writer was Thor Ragnarok. He was the writer behind Thor Ragnarok as well. So you feel a little of that jokiness that, personally, I'm not a huge fan of Ragnarok. I think a lot of the moments, the important character-driven moments, get undercut by a dodgeball to the face. And I felt like that was, like we're saying, that was the back half of this movie.
Yeah.
Where any time they had a chance for something important, and don't get me wrong, I don't mind the jokes. The jokes are good. I think when delivered well, especially across some of the other Marvel films, they work.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think they go a little bit too far.
I do think, I'm terrible for this with finding out spoilers on things, and it doesn't tend to, unless the film was like Infinity War, for example. If I'd known what was happening at the end there, I would have been really gutted to know. But with Black Widow, again, I'm not kind of desperate to see it at all. But where I found out kind of what happens towards the end, I think based on what's been happening in the Disney series that have been on, so Captain America, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, with things like that, and the Dark Avengers potentially forming or being formed, that's kind of interesting to see where that's gonna go. I don't know whether there's a different name for them or something like that, but I like the fact that there's something building in the background. Almost, it's it's happening, but it's not too kind of in your face. It's just like we'll sprinkle that in at the end or in parts, and I think that could lead to some interesting things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it almost feels like we're going in two different directions. One, and that's appropriate for how Loki ended. But, we're going in this multiverse stage on one side, and then Dark Avengers, Thunderbolts, whatever we're calling them.
Thunderbolts, yeah.
Yeah. You're building towards one with Hawkeye, Yelena, John Walker, couldn't remember his name. Building with him towards one side of it, and then you obviously have the Loki, Doctor Strange stuff on the other side of it. And I don't know if they'll ever converge. Do we then have to become fans of like the street heroes, or do we have to become fans of the space multiverse heroes? So that'll be interesting.
Are you looking forward to the sort of coming phase? Do you see some of the sort of elements of that, and are any you're quite excited about?
Yeah, so the one I was actually most excited about coming up is going to be Hawkeye. I love the run that it's based on, the Matt Fraction comics. Anything that's been Hawkeye since then, I've gotten and collected. I really appreciate what they did with the character, and then I like the Kate Bishop, who is like other Hawkeye or Lady Hawkeye or whatever they call her, because they're both called Hawkeye. I like that she's coming in. Looking forward to Haley Steinfeld playing that character, and I'm really curious where they're going to go with it, and if is this the end for Jeremy Renner, which may be appropriate given some of the stuff we found out about Jeremy Renner. But
really, yeah. I don't know. I need to
I think
Google after the show.
Yeah, I think there was some stuff going on with his wife or his partner that does not reflect well on him. So it's unfortunate. And so, yeah, but that was the one I was looking forward to. And then when they drop in Yelena potentially showing up in it, I think that'll be exciting going forward. And then, yeah, as far as movies go, I think Shang-Chi looks awesome. It looks really good. Really so good. Those are the two for me.
What you mentioned Loki a minute ago. You finished Loki now?
I have finished Loki, yeah.
What were your thoughts? Because I've finished it. Matt hasn't, but he doesn't mind us talking about it. So I loved it. I thought it was really good. I felt there was one episode that really, I can't remember if it was the third or the fourth, which really for me kind of I thought was a little bit cheesy and a little bit corny. It kind of painted him. It was the one where he caught up with Sylvie, and then they were going off somewhere. I can't remember where it was, off to that planet. Didn't they go to a moon or something like that?
Yep.
And yeah, for me that episode, it felt a little cheesy, but I felt the disappointment that I had at the end of that was kind of almost answered in the following episode, which kind of made it redeem it in a weird sort of way. But overall, for scenery, for story, for Tom Hiddleston was incredible in it. I thought, in fact, the whole cast I thought were incredible. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think same episode, and I think if you watch those, if it was 3 and 4, kind of as a two-parter, it makes it it makes it more, much more sense, and it's, a weird, when they release them weekly, it's a little frustrating that way. But if you binge the two, you don't even notice the separation there. But I love the show. I agree. This was Tom Hiddleston's show. And he ran with it. He did an incredible job. The one frustration that I had, which is becoming more of a frustration with the MCU movies as a whole, is how much time they spent with He Who Remains in the final episode. I wanted a little bit more time, wrapping up Loki and Sylvie's character arc, season arc for the story before we get like a prologue to Phase 4 or Ant-Man or whatever that was a prologue for. I just wish we spent a little bit more time wrapping up some of those stories without teasing what comes next. Like it felt like 70-30 tease when it should be maybe 30-70 tease. Yeah,
and I also felt that with that episode, to throw in He Who Remains the way they did, and don't get me wrong, I thought I can't remember his name, something Majors, isn't it?
Jonathan Majors.
Jonathan Majors.
Yeah.
I thought he was brilliant, don't get me wrong, but it felt like it needed more. If you're going to have an episode with him, it felt like it needed, like you said, use an episode to wrap things up, even if you threw an extra episode in, to just kind of give a bit more context to it all, because it did feel like the ending was like, oh, is that it? I felt like you said, there was a lot more there.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, we're going to get a second season, which I wasn't expecting, to be honest. I didn't think many of these would go more than one season. But I did feel like I completely agree with what you say there, basically.
Yeah, again, Jonathan Majors did a great job. Tom Hiddleston was excellent. I always blank on her name, but the woman that plays Sylvie was incredible. Yeah. Even if you tack on an extra like 25 minutes to this episode, if you give, somebody brought that up to me. It's like, oh, hey, Marvel did, everybody complains that the Marvel endings are all the same now, where it's, hero versus carbon copy, but they finally gave you something different. Why are you complaining? I was like, well, I'm not complaining about like how they chose to end it. I'm complaining how they parsed out their time. And I think whether it's Breaking Bad, The Wire, any of those like prestige shows, they can wrap up a character and season arc while still teasing the next year's storyline. I think that's what made me struggle with the Loki season finale.
Yeah, definitely. Did you enjoy Owen Wilson in it?
I did, actually. At first I was a little like put off by him. I felt like he was just another Owen Wilson character, but the more he played, the more I actually liked him in it. And I hope that we see him more in the second season.
I agree. I felt, and me and Matt spoke about it several times, I felt Owen Wilson, I think no matter what he's in, will always be the Owen Wilson stereotypical character. I'm watching it and I'm thinking, this is Marley and Me, this is Wedding Crashers, this is
Marley
all of them films. It is. You just have them little moments about him, like where he just shows like a genuine softness to him. It's just like, I just love this guy. I don't know why, because really he sticks out like a sore thumb in the MCU universe, really. But at the same time, it just works in a weird way.
I was going to say he's quite well cast for that character, though. I think they probably, you know, the quirks and so on of that character are pretty much Owen Wilson, aren't they? So
yeah. The other thing, the story that I picked, I mentioned before, we were going to pick a story each that kind of crops up, and this probably wraps up our kind of superhero stuff for now, because we have got something coming a bit later. But last week there was a video released by Ryan Reynolds. I don't know if you've seen it, which is him as Deadpool and Taika Waititi, I don't know what his name. Him as Korg, and they were watching the trailer for Free Guy. And what were your thoughts on this? There's been a lot of rumours. Is this going to be him coming into the MCU and that universe?
Yeah, you know what? I saw it after the fact, after like all the big news came out, because to be completely honest, I'm not totally interested in Free Guy. Like when it shows up on Disney Plus or Hulu or wherever it shows up, like I'll watch it. And so it was like, oh, they're in this commercial together. So I wasn't like, I'm like, oh, okay, fine, I'll get to it. And I got to it later. I thought it was fun. I thought it was a nice little tease between friends. Definitely, you know, it shows the Disney Fox merger. You know, I think for one of the first times, really, they're acknowledging some of the legacy Fox content, which is nice. I have no problem. I think Ryan Reynolds would be a great addition to the MCU. I think, you know, they have to tone Deadpool down a little bit, which everybody knows. But he's, you know, this goes back to another comic with Hawkeye in it, but the Secret Avengers, which was a run that included Phil Coulson as a character in it, Nick Fury Jr., which is a version of Nick Fury, who's the son of Nick Fury, who looks like Samuel L. Jackson, so that they can movies.
Samuel.
Yeah. So I would totally be interested in seeing like him run around maybe with those street level characters and have some fun with it. And, you know, if we're gonna do this for another 10 years or even more, like let's start having, you know, some real fun with some of those characters too, and pop in some freshness on it. So I'd be good with it.
I do think it'd be interesting though to you know, you saying them sort of toning it down a bit. I think the only worry that I have in my mind is with something like Venom, like using that as a case study, because for me, Venom was another one of those films that was the subject matter and sort of the bad guy Riz Ahmed, what was it? The bad guy in that, when he was doing those experiments on the people and like getting homeless people in there, there's some really dark sort of like touches to it. But then Tom Hardy's doing this weird slapstick thing, like with Venom. And you just think, what's going on here? And even like the new trailer for the second one, it just left me cold. It was just like a bit embarrassing. So for me personally, watching it, it's like, oh God, what are you trying to do? And I would hate for Deadpool to end up like that. It's like I don't know, sort of like a diluted version that loses its identity in some way.
Yeah, that's fair. No, that's definitely a fair concern. I think you're absolutely right about the new Venom movie, especially where Carnage is he's a serial killer, wasn't he? Cletus Cassidy was a serial killer, and then you got Venom making breakfast and, you know, hucking it up in his kitchen. It's like,
exactly.
This is weird.
It's weird. But no, I don't know. But it would be really interesting seeing how. I don't know. I'm just trying to think what sort of, in a way, I think like with the Spider-Man movies, that, you know, they're very different movies, but I think they've got quite a carefree humour to them that is like in a way related to how Deadpool is, if you know what I mean. There's that sort of playful element to it, and you can see like a connection in that sort of sense. You know, I'm not an expert on the comics, so I don't know how Deadpool appears, or what sort of interaction he has with the other sort of Marvel characters in the comics. But it would be interesting maybe if he did, they introduced him to another project, he comes in somewhere somehow.
I think there was always the talk of potentially him, and if X-Men carried on, obviously there was the whole him and Wolverine skits and things like that. But I don't know. I think there's something, as much as everyone would love to see all these characters come in from the various different films, I mean, they all have their own kind of unique tones as well. I mean, when you think about the Netflix series of
Luke Cage and
Cage and obviously Daredevil, which was for me incredible. I loved it. I mean, but again, you couldn't get away with that tone of violence in the MC universe of like we're saying, Spider-Man and Iron Man and all of them. So I don't know if you take, the only way I think it could work surely would be the MCU guys going into the other ones to make them darker in a way and to make it a bit more gritty in that respect, because I think taking the others out of what they do, it just kind of, like you say, it takes something away from what attracted you to it in the first place, which for me was, when I think to Daredevil, like Fisk as Kingpin, like that, he was terrifying at times, and some of the scenes where he's beating people up, and it's grim. Do you know what I mean? But there's almost an element of, well, you don't get that in the kind of the MC universe that we're kind of watching every year with 2 or 3 films. You don't get that level, and that's why I think there needs to be, I don't know, if you bring one in, it needs to be done very carefully so you don't ruin what that character's bringing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, one thing that moving away from Marvel, actually, you mentioned some sort of very iconic TV series like The Wire and so on a moment ago. Was you a fan of The Sopranos?
I have not seen, I actually never seen The Sopranos. I've seen a couple episodes here and there and never finished it. I get a ton of slack for that. How have you never done that?
So
don't worry. Up until last year, we were in exactly the same situation. And a friend of James's who's been on the show, we had this conversation and he was absolutely disgusted that we hadn't seen it. So he bought us season 1 each to watch it. And I ended up binging all 7, I think there's 7 seasons of it. But the reason I brought it up is recently there was a trailer for, they're doing a prequel to The Sopranos. And they have oh god, what's his name? James
Gandolfini.
His son,
it's his son, which is I don't know if you've seen the trailer. It's quite uncanny. I think he's got, he doesn't look identical, but and if you've ever seen any of The Sopranos, that Tony Soprano has this look. It's like this slightly dopey look, but you can tell he's thinking and like something's going through his head. And his son had exactly that same look, and I was getting quite getting sort of chills watching it. Being a fan of the series now and seeing like these characters young and so on, I think that'll be very interesting. So I'm normally quite doubtful when they try, and it feels like a bit of a cash grab, if you know what I mean. Doing a prequel, you think, oh come on, just let it be what it is. But I think this has got a bit of potential to it.
I mean, I've seen a handful of episodes, like a limited handful of episodes, but I know how it ends, and I don't think anybody on the planet doesn't know how it ends.
Do you know how it ends, James?
No, I don't. You didn't tell me. You didn't tell me, but you can tell me.
No, I didn't. So I wanted you to watch 7 series.
No pressure.
I'll just leave it super vague. But do you think that it, like this movie, for somebody who's seen the show and loves the show, and obviously we've only gotten the trailer so far, which looks incredible. Do you think this is a chance at redemption for that ending? Yeah.
Essentially, and as Pat said, I think everyone probably knows. Do you want me to say?
Yeah, I'm happy for you to say that.
It ends literally just going to black. Like there's a scene where all of this stuff has happened. and it's this sort of rare moment where Tony and his wife and his son are together sitting in this restaurant. It's one of their favourite restaurants, and Meadow and the daughter is just coming through the door, and you're hearing the bell of the door going, and there's been a guy sort of hanging around in the restaurant, and you think, well, what's he up to? And Tony sort of clocked him, but literally the door of the bell goes, and it's just bang, and it goes to black, and that's it.
The end.
That is literally the end of it.
Wow.
And it's that whole earlier on in the show, because up until the point, a lot of sort of his peers have been killed, but because there's like this big sort of turf war almost going on. And I think I'm paraphrasing, but he says someone says, or he says, when it's your time, you won't even know it. It's a phrase like that. So it suggests that maybe Tony's been assassinated, basically, and it suggests that maybe a lot of that series you've already seen is possibly almost like a sort of a dream as such. There are all these sort of things, but I don't think anyone sort of
Different
confirmed or denied
conspiracies.
what it was. Yeah. But it's really disappointing, having invested, God knows how many hours.
You've not sold it to me.
This it, yeah.
but this movie, that's going to be a prequel from him growing up.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I'm with you.
Because they talk about the story actually in the series, because his dad was a small-time crook, and sort of his uncle who is a big part of the show. His uncle is actually like the head of the family throughout most of the Sopranos series, but he's getting old. So sort of like, even though he's the visual head, Tony's pretty much in charge. So it's a story of him as like a teenager when he's first finding his feet in this world as such, but he spent all his youth, like all his like childhood years and that, watching his father do these awful things, and in the series he's talking to his psychiatrist most of the time, so you've heard about a lot of these stories, and you've seen how his mother was involved with a lot of this stuff and how the uncle was involved in a lot of the stuff. So I think it's probably a lot of the stories you've already heard, you're now getting like a full visual treatment of these things that have shaped his life. So yeah, it'll be interesting. It did make me though, I watched that trailer and thought, I might need to watch it again, like the whole lot.
Of the whole of Soprano, not the trailer.
Yeah, no,
God.
the whole lot of the Sopranos.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain trailers that do that though. There's certain trailers that you watch and you go, I need to watch that again. That was just so much to take in. But yeah. So if you haven't watched Sopranos, what's kind of one of your top, outside of the MCU, what's one of your go-tos that you'd recommend to people?
All-time go-tos, I could give you two. One, if you were a fan of that first hour of Black Widow, The Americans, which is about
I've seen it.
It's really good. Two Russian spies live as American suburbanites, basically raising two kids. So it's everything that happens in the first like 10 minutes of Black Widow. Yeah. This idea of this illegal program. So you follow them from like 81 to 87. Just as the wall is about to collapse and the Soviet Union comes down. So it is one of the most gripping shows I've ever seen. Acting is Kerry Russell's in it. She's incredible. And then the second one would be, and this is an older one, but similar, on FX, was The Shield, which is based on the Rampart cop issue in LA in the 90s. Michael Chiklis plays Vic Mackey as a corrupt cop who thinks he's doing good. It's just
I keep thinking I need to see that, because I remember that was one of those series where I probably saw a handful of them, and when I did see them I was absolutely gripped, and I was thinking, wow, this is incredible. Because it again, in a way, probably sort of akin to Sopranos with Tony Soprano, you related to him so much, and there were so many life experiences that he had, and you thought, wow, I can really relate to that. But he was an absolute monster. And I remember getting that from the main guy in that, he's a policeman, but the things he does, like in it, are terrible, aren't they?
Yeah, things he does. He has a wife. He has his 3 kids. Where it's, you follow him and you feel for this guy who just wants to make a good life for them, but then when he like clocks into work, you're like, oh no, I don't feel for him anymore. Like,
no.
You spend the whole series like, do I want him to get caught or do I not want him to get caught? Which apparently is the theme for both of those shows. With the Americans, you want them to get caught because they're Russian spies, and then you want in the Shield, you want these guys to get caught because they're dirty cops. But then you root for him the whole way through. So I don't know what that says about me.
Well,
now that I say all this out loud, I'm like, wait a minute.
But funny you should say that. The last podcast we did, which hasn't come out yet, it's coming out on Wednesday, was a guy called Pietro, who's a screenwriter. And he did this thing with us. It was like this little sort of test. And he said, he did it with movies, but it will apply to this example. Think of 5 like movies or 5 series you really love. And then he said, the reason you really love them is there is an element to the main character that you can relate to. And it relates to either your personality or your life experience. And that is why you love it, because a good screenplay, it's not what you experience in watching it, but it's what you take home with you as well. So it's those elements that you do relate to, and you then think about afterwards, and you think, oh wow, I remember that situation or whatever. So yeah, it's all you, basically.
But that sounds very similar to not the actual I Know You Weren't a Cop, but you mentioned earlier Breaking Bad with Walt. He's doing what he's doing for his family to try and kind of give. I mean, me and Matt ripped Breaking Bad apart because Matt gave up after what series was it? It was 2 or 3, and I just couldn't anymore. But there was some beautiful moments in the beginning that when before he sort of finds himself and he's in that awful car and like he's got that dreadful life, and his wife pretty much hates him, and she's so awful to him. And I just remember sitting there and thinking, that poor guy. I feel so sorry for you. I get why you're so upset about this. But the journey that he goes on, and then he becomes nasty, becomes, the way he treats everyone. It's just, you have that, like you said, Pat, earlier, it's that kind of, you've got that feeling for him initially, but then it gets too out of hand that you then go, oh, no. I mean, it does come full circle to some extent, but yeah.
Did you like Breaking Bad?
I did the same thing. I never finished it. I used it as an example because I knew like the first couple seasons they were able to wrap some stuff up. But yeah, I never finished it either. It was just one that
I feel like we've got a connection here now. This is really good. There's 3 of us in the world.
Definitely good.
I mean, it told good stories. I just never really cared as much as I think a lot of people did.
I felt, and we've covered this so many times on this podcast, that it felt like such hard work. I felt like I was really working for it, and there was some great scenes, but so many people say, "Oh no, you've got to persist with it." Season 4 is where it's happening. I'm like, well, I shouldn't need to get to. I don't want to watch another series another season just to get to the good stuff. I should have had that already, but
yeah, okay. I agree.
I caution people with the Shield. You got to get to episode 6, and like episode 6 is where it really turned from like traditional kind of cop show to what the Shield ends up being. But that's 6 episodes.
That's 6 episodes. We can handle 6 hours.
I think we can get through 6 episodes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Is there anything that's caught your eye in the past week or so, sort of whether it be TV or movies or anything?
Yeah, I mean, what we've been watching now, and it's more of a rewatch, is The Witcher. So really enjoying that series. I don't know if you guys have
no, I've never watched that.
I started it and I just couldn't get into it. But I'd never played the game. But yet again, we work with a colleague of ours who raves about it massively.
Because she does find the main actor incredibly attractive. I think that's
that.
part of the buy-in of that
There is
series.
that.
I'm pretty sure that's why my girlfriend wants to do this rewatch.
I thought you was going to say that's why you wanted to as well.
He looks like Henry Cavill. We're going to keep watching. It's like, okay. So yeah, we're redoing that. I don't know. I didn't get to it this weekend, mostly because I choose to refuse it exists. But if you guys saw Space Jam, and what
I've watched,
the first Space Jam.
See, that's the thing. I mean, I watched, my boys and my wife were watching Space Jam, and it was, from what I took in of it, it was okay, but it's not Michael Jordan. You know, it's not got Bill Murray in it. It's not Michael Jordan. It's not so many things. It's not got the nostalgia that the original Space Jam carries, but it's. I think everyone probably expected that, really, didn't they? It's, you know.
Well, the one thing I was laughing at watching the trailer, and you know, again, same thing. I remember when the first Space Jam came out, I was, I don't know, 9 or something at the most. It was perfect timing for everything, and it was, you know, I probably saw it 3 or 4 times in the theater, and it was so much fun. Saw it at a second run theater months later. Like it was just the movie you went to go see. But I always find odd that, you know, I see the trailer for the Space Jam 2 movie with LeBron. He's trying to get his kid to play basketball and focus on basketball. First of all, those aren't his real kids, and they're doing the same thing that the first Space Jam movie did, which was recast the main person's kids.
Yeah.
Because Michael had two boys that ended up playing college basketball, and then LeBron has Bronny Jr., who is like a stud college, high school basketball player that is going to go play in college. And it's like, how is this? We all know that this kid is like a real thing. Like his kid actually likes basketball. And now you're going to sell me this on top of all the other stuff that you're trying to sell me in this movie. You're going to sell this weird storyline that his kid doesn't like to play basketball. It's just such a bizarre thing that they do.
The weirdest thing for me in the whole movie, though, is Don Cheadle. And I like Don Cheadle. I think he's played so many cool parts. But he plays this eccentric sort of tech geek guy who has created this piece of software, but sort of exists in a virtual world as well. And he's got this weird sort of AI robot thing that he talks to and that. And it's just odd seeing him in that character. He's really trying to make it work, but it's just not him. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, he's great at so many things, but it's just not him. It needs to be him
in a big war machine suit, or
well, no, he just needs to be more of a comic actor, and he's been very funny in lots of films, but he's just not right to do that sort of zany sort of thing. I don't know.
Did either of you see the? I think he even made a tweet about it, or came out with a statement about it. He got nominated for one of the best, wasn't it, supporting actors or something like that, for his appearance in oh god, it keeps escaping my mind. What's it called? Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Which he was in for all of like 3 minutes, I think, and he got nominated.
Oh, Don Cheadle.
Yeah.
He was in Falcon and Winter.
Well, that shows how much attention you was paying. But yeah, he was in there talking to Falcon. And
is that quite near the beginning?
Yeah, it's when he's passing on the shield, I think, and he's giving up the shield.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's there for, like I say, 3 minutes. He got nominated. I don't think he won the award, did he?
Amazing.
I don't think the award. I think the awards happen in September now this year.
Right. Okay. But he's in amongst the nominees for
he got nominated for it. Yeah. And same thing. It was just bizarre to see. And he did tweet out. He's like, to all the haters, I agree. To all my fans, thanks for it. To everybody else, I'm in the same boat as you. I have no idea what this is for, but now I'm Emmy nominated. It's okay.
Yeah. Amazing. He, that will now be on every film poster that he does, isn't it? Emmy nominated.
Yeah. Well, I said we were going to come back to MCU very briefly. I say briefly, it depends how long the answer is, but it's time for another one of these.
Question mark. And a gentlemen, thank you for having me back on. My question for you and your guest tonight is, in 10 years' time, what do you think the MCU will look like?
Question mark.
Quite a big question, really. I think it's a good one. But seeing as you're the yet another MCU co-host, what are your
Flash
thoughts?
Marvel expert.
Yeah.
That's putting me on the spot. That's a deep question, and I don't know where it's going to be. I think that I always have the concern that they're oversaturating the market right now with 8 TV shows coming out in the next, including the last 12 months, and like 8 shows in 18 months, plus I think 4 or 5 movies in the same time frame. That's a lot of content to take in. In the way that they're plugging along with some of these, which is pay attention to the show and then go watch the movie and you get a fuller experience. Is that going to alienate some of the regular fans? And I don't think it will. I think just the overabundance of content will start to drain on people a little bit, which is unfortunate because they do have a deep roster of good characters. And characters like the X-Men, characters like the Fantastic Four will certainly revitalize interest back in the universe, in the franchises. Where I have a little concern right now is just, I think Eternals I like characters. I thought the book, especially the Neil Gaiman one at this point now it's like 15 years ago, but from 15 years ago, it was a really great read. But I think that's really going to be that'll be the watershed moment to see how sustainable this is, because that's a deep cut group of characters, heavy concepts back from like the Jack Kirby days, that if they could land that one to critical success and commercial success, I think they have a long runway ahead of them where they're going to be producing just as much, if not more content 10 years from now. But if it doesn't land quite so well, and even if Shang-Chi struggles beforehand, I think that's going to be a telling moment too, where they might want to dip back in the well, use the multiverse theory that they put out there to maybe bring back an Iron Man, a Captain America somehow, and use that to get some butts in the seats.
The Eternals, that I can't remember where I saw it, but am I right in thinking, I'm sure I saw someone tweet or post out that they're the ones potentially to save the multiverse as such?
Yeah, I saw that tweet too. Like, that's never been a big comic book moment. This has been like the Eternals were a long time coming for Jack Kirby. He was always trying to tell these like epic kind of godlike mythology moments, and he did it with Thor. Then he did it with the Fourth World, so Orion and Darkseid and Apocalypse and DC. And then he came back to Marvel and it was like, okay, I'll just do my own thing with these. They've never really gotten too involved in the multiverse, so to speak. They've been focused on their own little like subhuman type villains that they have to face. Yeah, I don't know where they're going with it. I would think that because they are new characters to the film universe, that they'll use the multiverse for some of the established ones. So Doctor Strange, Wanda, Loki, characters we already have an attachment with and we're willing to follow where we go. I am interested where they go with the Eternals, just because, like I said, I like the characters. It's just going to be, it'll be interesting how they, tell that story. Especially, it's, to me, it felt like the trailer looked like this really heady, like Cloud Atlas. I don't know if you guys remember the trailer for the movie Cloud Atlas with Tom Hanks, where it goes through like decades and centuries, and they travel through, and they're meant to save time.
Rings a bell.
Yeah, it was a weird one that I don't think ever hit. But it's same thing. Like, I just worry that like this one might be a little too heavy for some of your standard MCU audiences. So that's my saying. Like, these two movies right now are like will set the stage for the next decade, which is a tough burden for them.
Yeah.
And I sort of, controversially, I just think probably in 10 years, I don't think it will be anything like what it is now. And in terms of culturally significant, I think they've had a good run from like, if you think before sort of 2008, when it was 2008 Iron Man came out, wasn't it? Before that, you had Batman, which was, you know, successful and so on. But in the other films, they were sort of, you know, almost gimmicky. Superhero movies were a bit gimmicky, but then from Iron Man onwards, they sort of struck gold, and it was very much part of, you know, everyone identified with superheroes all of a sudden, and all the, you know, the geeks said, look, we was right, we was doing this all these years, and now everyone, you know, likes it. And I think they've had like, you know, 13-year run of that now, and all of the recognisable characters now are being slowly sort of passed out. And is there, for me, and you know, I'm not a hugely knowledgeable about all the characters, but I don't see in this next phase strong, you know, equivalents to Iron Man or Thor or Captain America and these big iconic ones that are going to take it in that same direction and have these huge blockbuster movies. I think they're probably fortunate that Disney Plus is the success that it has been, because they've now got a platform to have that free reign and create that universe and create what they want to a very high standard, and they do. But I guess in a way, for me being a Star Wars fan, it's a bit like Star Wars is now. I mean, Star Wars will never be what it was at a point in time, and it's still held in incredibly high regard, and people like me absolutely adore it, and there are, you know, newer fans that come along, but it's not niche. Star Wars not niche, but it's sort of, you know, not everyone likes Star Wars, and not everyone identifies with the newer characters that are coming out, but you get something like The Mandalorian that comes along that is really high quality and people will enjoy, but the average man or woman on the street probably wouldn't go out in their way to see it. And I don't know, and again, this may be really controversial, I don't know how many kids like it will say, I really love, you know, whatever character it is, and relate to them in the way that they have, you know, previous generations have grown up. Like I grew up with Luke Skywalker or Boba Fett and that. How many will grow up saying, I absolutely love whatever character? Apart from Grogu, you know, the child everyone loves, you know, Baby Yoda, don't they? But people will probably love something like Baby Yoda and have it on the T-shirt or whatever, but never watch The Mandalorian.
Yeah,
they'll just have a plush toy from the Disney store because it's cute. Will now appreciate the whole, you know, universe that Star Wars is in? Probably not. And you may get that. Same with Groot. Groot will be an iconic thing with like Guardians and that I think, you know, still has potential, but I don't know, maybe I'm just a cynic with this. Yeah.
For me, I agree with what both of you are saying, really, but I don't know about you guys, but after Homecoming, it kind of felt like a big kind of like, do you know what I mean? Like we've just gone through like 10 odd years.
Thank God I made it. You know,
but you felt like you made it to an end, didn't you?
Yeah.
And then it was very quickly. We're now starting the next phase, and it's kind of like all
guess what?
That,
you've got 15 more films that you've got to keep up with. Yeah.
But all of that kind of era, like you said, from Iron Man, possibly even what was it, Incredible Hulk? Was that before Iron Man? It might have even been.
Well, it was like a month later. So May and Incredible Hulk in June or July.
Yeah, really.
Which I still find hard to kind of connect with.
Was that the Edward Norton one?
Yeah, it was the Norton one, wasn't it?
Yeah, which was an okay film, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
But it just didn't feel like it. Like when I think of the MCU, them phase 1 to 3 or whatever it was, it never felt like it fit in there as such. But that's just me. But yeah, it felt like we'd gone on such a long, you know, put in a lot of hours to see all these films and build that kind of connection and relationship with all the characters, and it was done so well. It always felt like the bar was set so high that whatever comes next, you're always going, was it as good as what's happening? And I think one thing I've said before is characters like Wanda and Vision, characters like Loki, I think it's good that they had series rather than a standalone film, because realistically, would I want to go and see one of them as much as I would have wanted to see Iron Man or Guardians? Probably not. So I think it's clever what they've done. but it's kind of going, we've now got to do it all again as such, and I will do it. That's the thing. I think all three of us probably, by the sound of it, will do it. It's just, I don't know. And the other thing for me is it's so clearly mapped out where it's all going, where I think before we weren't as aware probably as where
it evolved, didn't
now
it?
We know what's coming out in 2025. Do you know what I mean? It's not
and I think that
like...
goes back to what Pat was saying earlier in terms of like you watch the end of the film or the end of the series and almost like you're trained now like a performing seal to like wait for that credit scene, thinking there's gonna be a credit scene, and then they're gonna throw me this little nugget of sort of what's gonna happen next. And if you haven't seen that, then you don't know. Me and James have a conversation all the time, and James is saying, yeah, well, that guy that appeared there in that sort of scene, that's supposed to be from this film, and that's going to happen there. I just find it alienating sometimes. So I just think I can't keep up with this. It's that's wear you out.
Yeah, James, your point, I wish it wasn't because of the reason behind it. Like, I wish COVID wasn't the driving factor to keep Black Widow out of the movie for the theaters for a year. Like, I wish, COVID never happened, all that stuff. But, I'm in a sense glad that they took a year off where, there was no content where you can sit back for a year and not worry about. And again, I love this stuff about podcasts about this stuff. We talk about this, make videos, but don't get me wrong. But I was glad that there was a little bit of a time between Far From Home and then WandaVision, where we got to sit back, breathe for a second. And then the way that I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier doing the same thing. I think Falcon and Winter Soldier was initially supposed to be the first TV show. So it was supposed to be Black Widow, then Falcon, but because of the Black Widow tag at the end and what happens in the Falcon show, they decided to shift it to Wanda, which I think, felt a little bit better, because when you start Wanda, it's a little bit more low key.
Yeah.
The stakes get a little bit bigger, but it's a little bit more low key, and you're even making a somewhat meta commentary about, hey, we're on TV now. So yeah, I wish none of that happened. I'm just glad that we had that little bit of a break in between.
Agreed.
Either.
Yeah, 100%. Well, there you go. That's our thoughts on the next 10 years. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. Pat, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. More than welcome to come on again. Where can our listeners and our viewers find you, your show, your entertainment company? Yeah, you could find our entertainment company, ForgottenEntertainment.com. You'll see all of our shows on there, everything from Yet Another MCU Podcast to Forgotten Cinema and any of the other ones that I mentioned today, plus a few more. You could find us on Instagram and Twitter, mostly on Instagram. That's me, just posting memes at this point and having some fun with the content. And you could listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And we are on YouTube with some of those videos that I talked about. You just have to search Forgotten Entertainment. We don't have the handle just yet, so the more subscribers, the better. So appreciate that. Awesome. Well, if you're listening, if you're watching, go and subscribe to his channel. It is awesome. But for now, by the way, we'll put all the links in the description as well, so you will be able to find the channels there. But for now, Pat, thanks for joining us. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Don't forget, if you did enjoy it, please like, subscribe on whatever platform you're watching and listening on, because then that way you won't miss out on any future episodes we put out. Yeah, and don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms as well. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and give us a follow, and you'll be able to keep up to date with all the latest episodes and posts that we put out there. But thank you for listening and watching. And we'll see you next episode.